So the question is there a spiritual use of marijuana? Looking at sadhus in India, for example, smoking quite a lot of it, then you might feel, okay, do I also need to do that to get anywhere or not? Or is it actually something which is going to stop or limit spiritual growth? No, this question is there among many people that are spiritually inclined, I think. This is there, and so it's good to answer it. And so basically, it must be clear that there is definitely no need for it. There can be some use of it, spiritually speaking, but there is definitely no need for it. So in that way, I am not going to say I am for or against use of marijuana in any way. It all depends who we are talking about, in what kind of situation, and no, everybody has this freedom, like we have this freedom in so many different ways. But with this freedom also comes a certain responsibility to use it in the right way. And then spiritually speaking, also towards yourself, of course, it creates a certain kind of responsibility to use it in the right way. And so in that way, there are many things to say about it. And maybe the first thing is, of course, that smoking is very bad for health. So in that way, it's not advisable, you can say. And you can also see in India how many of the users, actually, they are not smoking it. They are more eating or drinking it. They're making basically some ghee extract of it, and then use this, I don't know, to make cookies or bang lassi or something like that. That is actually used quite a lot, especially among householders. It is preferred, this use, on the one side, because then there's no smoking and there's no negative health effect from that. And then on the other side, because the effect is also, let's say, more mild, and maybe longer lasting, but less extreme, which may be a good idea. So another thing is, of course, that when we compare that to many other drugs, marijuana has the big advantage of not being addictive on the level of the body. If you stop an alcoholic from drinking, he'll have lots of negative feedback coming from the body, and if you take a heroin addict, then that's even very well known how ill they become actually when they have to stop. So these things are not there in marijuana. If there is some kind of addiction, it is mostly mental and emotional. It is used then to, let's say, give a kind of feeling, to compensate maybe for a lack of that feeling, and in that way it becomes a dependency, it becomes a habit. It can also be quite a social thing. So then definitely there, we can also question it. But if we want to stop, it'll be very easy on the level of the body. So that is one big advantage. If you look at this from Western science, I studied that quite a lot in my youth. There's actually more than 100 compounds involved in the overall effect of marijuana, many of which they have actually not very much an idea what it's doing. And the two main compounds that are named are always THC and CBD. THC being more responsible for the increased mental excitement that it brings, and then CBD being mostly responsible for the relaxation that it brings, which are two very different things. And I think there it's also quite interesting that CBD oil is something which you can buy separately. It's also totally legal in Europe, at least. And so to use that for a little bit more calmness is definitely something which can help some people which have a problem to get, more calm. I've never used that myself, but I've used it with a dog, and it worked very well, actually. And it's also supposed to be without any health risk or something. So that is something that is there. And interestingly also is to see that then the way that marijuana works is that it's links to certain receptors in our system, which are actually created for a neurotransmitter called Anandamide. And from a yogic point of view, that is of course quite interesting, because Ananda, that is actually the bliss, the feeling of bliss that we are seeking through our yoga and meditation. You can say all yoga and meditation, we are doing it for Ananda. And okay, Ananda is quite a bit more than just the effect of Anandamide, but definitely there is a link there, But okay, that does not mean the smoking is a need, to get Ananda. No, actually, you are bypassing your normal way or yogic way to create Ananda in yourself by using marijuana. And so, yeah, it's important to know that actually, and there then make a very conscious choice, because the more you use it, the more you also there will become dependent on it to feel this bliss, because that's how our system works. Once it gets used to that, that thing goes more easy. So then the other thing we are not so much used to, it doesn't go so easy. This is how we are made. It's all about patterns. So that is something I would say in a more general way that we have to understand, that we can get bliss in so many different ways, and maybe they require a little bit more effort, a little bit more training also, but definitely what we can get out of our yoga and meditation practice, it goes 100,000 times beyond whatever marijuana can bring us. So in that way, I definitely do know some people who've been involved with it so much that it actually means that spiritual practice is not there, because they depend on that for this feeling of bliss. While the desire for this feeling of bliss is stimulating many other people to do a lot of practice every day and to always increase their capacity there, their training, themselves to do this, so that it comes very easily then after a while also. So that is important. But anyhow, the whole story about the neurotransmitters, it gets very complicated as more and more research is being done. Generally speaking, in yoga and Ayurveda, it is simply said that the way marijuana works is that it stimulates the lunar energy and it subdues the solar energy. So the lunar energy, what does that really mean? It means the emotional energy, the enjoyment of the senses, of course, is there. Anything to do with our feeling will become more strong when we use marijuana. And so that is also meaning that it stimulates mind, because mind is very lunar. Even though we associate mind a lot with thought, rational thinking actually does not so much define what mind is. I've said it many times. We are emotional creatures. And where do we experience these emotions? In our mind. So in that way, smoking marijuana will stimulate mind. And there, generally, it will bring a kind of creativity, you can say, an increased enjoyment, and a kind of relaxation also. But we have to understand this in such a way that it will stimulate whatever lunar energy you are already having. So if you are, let's say, an artist and you're drawing something, then it can be used. It is very often used, I think. I think if you look at most popular artists worldwide throughout history, very often some use of alcohol, drugs, marijuana, LSD, whatever, has been there, and often hidden, of course. But okay, it is one of those ways. But if you're already quite paranoid, which is another way of being quite lunar, like, let's say, more like a lunatic, no? Then use of marijuana will also stimulate that. So it will only make you more paranoid, no? So this is a little bit how to see it. It stimulates lunar energy, but it's your energy. So the question is then, what are you doing with it? No? Because whatever you do with it, it will only increase it. And there may be helpful or totally not helpful. No? And by stimulating the lunar energy, it will also subdue the solar energy, which means, and that may be one of the biggest advantage, I would say, is that it somewhat subdues also the ego. That's totally the opposite of what alcohol does. The fire of alcohol will stimulate the ego very much. So people who are drunk, they usually like, oh, and they want this and they think that and so on. While a person who smokes marijuana mostly, is not creating problems for others very much. No? Not out of this ego, no. Ego is quite less, desires are less. But of course, if there is not so much ego there, that may also create laziness. Because it is the ego who thinks, oh, this job has to be done, let's do it. No? That's the self-confidence of the ego. No? So if that gets less, and a lot of jobs need to be done, but you're smoking marijuana, then probably they'll not get done. No? So in that way, I think this creates many problems in people who overuse it. No? It will definitely also lower your concentration ability, which again is a solar kind of ability. And so then, accidents can happen. No? Definitely it's not advisable to then drive a car or anything like that. No? That should also be quite clearly understood. No? It will lower your ability to react, to concentrate, and so on. So, and because it also stimulates sensory enjoyment, no? You eat something tasty, it becomes even more tasty, no? Then it may also quite stimulate bad habits related to such enjoyment. Like if you're already a lot into chocolate, then if you start also smoking marijuana a lot, then your use of chocolate might strongly increase, no? Both working together there, no? So in that way, it depends. Definitely, wheat is not good for people with vata problems and will increase it. Yeah. Although there is some good effect though on the eventual nervousness in the intestines. That is known. In India, when cows, they have some digestive problems, they'll give them wheat. No? And so that is known. No? So it can help a little bit with nervous intestines. But apart from that, because it activates mind so much, it creates more of a nervousness, let's say, and may then aggravate vata. Yeah, definitely. That's also why if people have a little bit had too much of it, they get very cold. They start shivering. That is clearly also a vata effect. The main thing I would say, and that's like for me, from my experience as a healer, quite absolute, if a person is already very much worrying, then definitely they should not do this. They may have 5 minutes or 10 minutes of more relaxation, followed by hours of paranoia. No? That I've seen too often, so that is definitely not what should happen. And some people, when they have, like, let's say, a bad experience when smoking marijuana, then definitely that is that, no? Because already too much fear is there. And that is creating a kind of paranoia, no? Which then creates a bad experience. So actually this can also be well explained by looking at the other rasas. Like if a person has an anger issue, which is very ego-dominated, then it might help. And, in the Indian way, that would mean, every day he gets a little pancake made with bhangi. It doesn't make him stoned in any way, no? It'll just a little bit reduce the ego and a little bit reduce the anger. If a person is depressed, it's also not advisable, because already in depression, mind is far too dominant, and there's a tendency to seek also the escape in mind, the escape in TV, the escape in whatever, give some escape. So then that's just too much of an attraction. So there is also not advisable. In terms of sadness, it can help. But again, the idea is then not to make somebody stoned, to forget a little bit about somebody who died. This is not what I'm saying. I'm more there talking about a very mild use, maybe through food or something, which may a little bit, you could say, like an antidepressant, or some other herbs which are also known like that, to give a little bit a better mood and a little bit maybe soften that sadness, so that, I don't know, the person can function. Maybe he has kids or something. He has to do something. Actually, also another way to understand it is through the chakras, because the chakras are also lunar and solar. And in some the lunar will dominate, and in some the solar will dominate. So actually the first chakra is solar. It does not mean there's not a lunar aspect to it, but solar is dominant. So then, for sure, if you've been smoking marijuana, you will worry less about your work. Unless you're already there, very, very much worried, and paranoia may come. But generally speaking, you will be able to a little bit forget about it, which is, I think, why many people use it. And then second chakra, lunar chakra, will be stimulated, which means more pleasure of the senses in many different kinds of ways. But as I explained, with the danger of too much then dependency on that kind of pleasure to feel good. Especially from a yogic perspective, we should try to feel good from inside, not from whatever is tickling our taste buds or other buds. In third chakra, then, as I said, the ego will be less, so third chakra energy will also be less, unless we have really a third chakra problem. And that I see also sometimes. And with that I mean a problem of somebody who is like telling stories about themselves to themselves, and then that fantasy may be stimulated by smoking marijuana, and you can then see a person really like losing touch with reality when it comes to whatever they are doing, whatever they can do, whatever they are able to do. Maybe in that way they're totally, ruin their business or something like that by having too much fantasy there. So one of the uses then in India definitely is around fourth chakra. It will generate also more a feeling of love. More easily that feeling will come. So for bhakti, this is very often used. And then we have in India this famous festival called Shivratri, which is a feast for Shiva, who is also then in the stories often shown smoking marijuana. So then that night, many people in India will use it. Maybe, let's say, the old ladies will more use some bhangi drink or something like that. But anyhow, many will use it, which may not use it at all the rest of the year. But that night they will use it, and all night they will chant Shiva bhajans or whatever, in the temple or in some group event. And that use of marijuana will keep that going, and will really create a very strong feeling of bliss through the devotional chanting. So that is one of the main ways, I think, in India today it is still very much used. When then we look at the fifth chakra, which is all about understanding, then definitely smoking marijuana can bring some better understanding, and especially because we more will see the relativity of any truth. I sometimes think that with some people, when I hear them talking, then I'm thinking, maybe you'd better smoke something, so that you are not so much convinced of this one truth which you think you have found. Because in the intellect, in our mind, in our thinking, we cannot find the truth. No? From spiritual point of view, that is very clear. To find anything absolute as truth is beyond thinking, is beyond mind, no? Is in the pure beingness, is in the self, which cannot be explained, however much we talk about it, but we cannot really explain it. So whatever we say about that or anything else is only relatively true. And that actually I have seen in myself and in others. When smoking marijuana, they are better able to deal with that. Let's say they are better able to play with concepts without taking them too seriously, and that way they can actually get somewhere and not get stuck in thinking, oh, but this is true, so then that cannot be true. While actually all these truths, they're all true a little bit. And they're all like complementary to each other. In our understanding of ourselves and the world, that is very important. Whatever truths we find, it will complementary to other truths. There will not be one reason why something is happening. There will always be so many reasons working together to create something. So then whenever we want to do something, change something, then also there we have to see these different truths all working together. And so that's sort of understanding, I think, a little bit one can get more easily there, but not needed, no, not needed at all. But okay, it is used in that way and it can work in that way. So, and then it comes to sixth chakra, the principal desire to meditate and find the self and the bliss. So there many people, of course, have misunderstood the use of marijuana by the sadhus and thought that this was a way to learn how to meditate, which is totally in error. Because if you want to learn how to meditate, the first thing, and it is not a small thing, is to get mind under control, to concentrate, to become one-pointed. Only then you can really, meditate. So, but marijuana is going to make your mind even more out of control. To stop thinking will be even more difficult. Yes, for sure, you can maybe focus on something very intensely for a short time, but it will only be for a short time. And then mind will, shift to something else. So that is actually not working. So there we have to be very clear. If you want to develop concentration power in meditation, it should be avoided. And that should not be underestimated. Whatever, let's say, is being smoked in the evening will still affect your concentration ability the next morning. That is there. And so, it depends on what you want. But definitely, if you, let's say, you're having a spiritual holiday in which you want to meditate a lot, then don't spend the rest of the day smoking, because it will lead basically to nothing. And so that must be well understood. The only reason why then we have this association between marijuana and sadhus is that in a later stage, it can be helpful. Because it creates more of a distance between the observer and mind. Now, marijuana will stimulate mind. You will see yourself thinking things and you'll think even more than usual. What the hell am I thinking there? So it'll be more apparent that you are not your mind. It will become more clear that the mind is thinking things and you are observing it. And you are not the one thinking these things actually. It is just mind who is doing that. And because that becomes more clear, then this distance between mind and self, let's say, or the observer, becomes more clear. That in a later stage of meditation can be helpful. And that is why, originally I would say, sadhus use it, because, okay, some sadhus are also just having a good time. They're just having a good party. But in some schools where I have been, where marijuana was being used, this was usually combined with very strict practice. Like many hours of sitting without moving. And if you move, somebody's there to hit you with a stick. This kind of very strict kind of practice was then combined with that. so that you develop this power to keep mind and, let's say, yourself totally separated. And so that is where this use is. We have to, in deeper meditation, give up doership. I think you must remember that from some other talks. At some point, the meditation has to be done by mind, and you have to stay out of it. That part only is made more easy by smoking marijuana. But the part before that, where most people are still struggling, their doership is needed. Their concentration is needed. Their ego is needed. Their, lunar energy, no. It's not going to be helpful. So, then one important thing also to say about all this is that when we say, okay, it can be used, it can have some use or advantage, but only if done in the right way, at the right time, then there are a number of things to say there. And for example, one of the main things there is that any such use should be after sunset in the evening. That is the most logical time to, let's say, have a little bit excess lunar energy. Because the day, anyhow, it is solar by nature, because all of the prana in the air. So then a lot of work is normal, a lot of activity is normal. Knowing what you are doing is normal. Being concentrated is normal. So there the lunar energy will only disturb. Maybe not, okay, if you have a holiday, no kids, no responsibility whatsoever. But apart from that, it will always create a conflict. And it will be very exhausting also to then stay focused and stay alert and be involved and, all that. So that's really a waste of energy. So the best time, if you want to use it, I'm not saying you have to, but if you want to use it, best time is in the evening after sunset, where naturally lunar energy comes, but where you are already at the end of the day, a little bit tired from all that work during the day, and where then that lunar energy can create a little bit of problem, like becoming a little bit unhappy. Maybe some worrying, some depression, some negativity can come. There it can help to a little bit make your evening more creative, let's say, more enjoyable. But then another thing, very important, and very few people actually take it seriously into account, is dosage. What you see a lot is people, they come from work, okay, and it's been a hard and stressful day, and they come from work and they want to forget about it. They want to kind of lose that energy, that stress, and they come home and so they smoke some marijuana. That'll work. No, okay, there are many other things that will also work. Shavasana will work, breathing will work, mantra will work. But they all, okay, require a little more effort and a little bit more also ability, developed through practice. So then people, okay, choose the easy way and they smoke something. But the big problem is that actually the amount that they then generally use does not correspond to the desire that they have. And that is such a waste. And that, fortunately, I discovered already at a very young age. They come home, all they want is a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of like setting aside that work energy and coming into the energy of, enjoying some free time in the evening. But then they smoke something which will not create that, actually, which makes them totally high and unable to do anything serious, and maybe just, ready to lie in front of TV or something and, have some snacks. Then what else can you do than use this, let's say, in second chakra activities? But to use it for creativity, for art, for love, for bhakti, for understanding, for all these other things we've been talking about, that will then not be possible. And that is such a waste. So their dosage is very important, and actually it is more difficult also, practically speaking. Like alcohol is very easy to dose. You drink one beer, it's not going to make you drunk usually, no? You drink two, maybe you'll feel it a little. You drink three, you feel it more. And in that way, you can easily say, okay, now I've had three, that's enough, because I still want to do this. and I still want to call my mother, and I don't know, many things are there that I want to do, which will not be possible if I have more than 3. But the problem is that the way people usually consume marijuana is in such amount that immediately it like corresponds to a full load of alcohol. No, like maybe let's say 5 beers or 10 beers for some people, of course, who are quite into it, they need more. But so that is the thing, no? If you can dose it properly and use as little as possible in a way, then you can create that bit of relaxation that you're after, but it will not so much affect you, and you will still be able to use it in a positive way. I would say beyond second chakra. And that then will reduce, whatever problem one might feel to have with it, so much, because it'll be more in balance also in terms of dosage. So it's not so easy, because anyhow the things are very small, so you have to really divide them in very small quantities and maybe pre-roll your joints or whatever, so that I can always have one more. No? You can make something very light, like what they now call microdosing. No? This is very often prescribed whenever marijuana is being used to treat some kind of depression or other mental instability. They will prescribe microdosing, no? Which basically means very small doses, and you can always have one more. No? Why do you have to have these, let's say, 5 beers all at once? No? That's what you would be doing. No? So in that way, everything, and definitely also marijuana, has the right place, the right time, and the right dosage, depending on where you are and what you want to do. But some spiritual use is there, but not to learn how to meditate. That should be well remembered. And that confusion there, let's say, is so negative in effect, because if people are going to try that, they're only going to be more frustrated about meditation and become more dependent for their Ananda on the Anandamide created by the marijuana. And that may effectively, let's say, quite block their spiritual growth or slow it down quite a lot. So nothing wrong, but know about it. Study also the effects in yourself. Like when we talk about dosage, it's quite personal. And the less you use, the less you will need also. So that's also interesting. But so in that way, use it wisely, and then it can be good, but you don't need it.